Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of ChatNAPT with the AI chatterbots, Chuck and Howie. I'm Chuck, and this is my co-host, Howard. Welcome, Howard. It's a beautiful day.
It is. I just got back from the NAMM show, National Association of Music Merchants, which is everything music, right? Musical instruments, sound, lighting, everything you could ever need to produce music. It's a great show. They have a lot of well-known musical celebrities that show up at this event. I think this year's attendance was around 70,000 people. It's at the Anaheim Convention Center. All the floors, all the buildings, it covers everything.
Did you say 70,000?
Yep, they have multiple stages where people are performing every hour on the hour. Plus, on the exhibit floor, of course, they're showing off their musical instruments and they have people performing at a lot of the different booths. It is just an incredible week of music.
Well, you must have been like a kid in a candy store there.
I sure was. You know, I went last year for the first time, this year, second year. Last year, I focused on the exhibit floor. Like I went to every booth. I went and walked the entire exhibit floor on all three levels, plus all the other outbuildings. It was incredible. And I did a little bit of the music. This year, I reversed that. I did mostly music, right? I went to a lot of the live performances, and oh, it was amazing. There's so much talent there. Met a lot of great people there, too.
Oh, okay, good. Wow, so you had a good time.
Yeah. As a matter of fact, I met the guy who was CEO of Roland Instruments, UK. Happens to be a neighbor of a friend of ours, and he is now the global chief sales officer for Roland Instruments. So was able to sit down with him. He's a very busy guy. Got to spend about an hour and a half talking with him about just, life in general and business and things like that. But really cool. Had a lot of great discussions while I was there.
Nice, good. I see the paint is finally done. You got your new paint job up?
Got the entire interior of the house repainted, except for the basement, which was done a couple of years ago. The entire upstairs, beautiful. Did a nice job with the colors. If you recall, if you go back and look at the previous episodes, this was a mustard yellow. My wife calls it a baby poop yellow, but I don't think baby poop's that color. It shouldn't be. In any case, this is now milk chocolate. So I love that color. I think it's
a nice color. Our guest today, I've known Steve, one step removed. I've talked to him in person at NCSLI, but never done any business with Steve. And he is the Director of Measurement Excellence at Cummins Engines. Steve is unbelievably well known throughout the NCSLI community. He is the last year's Wildhack Award winner, and we'll talk a little bit about that today. One of Steve's favorites hobby is brewing, which is he's also well known for his escapades in brewing stories on what it took to develop his own brewery, how he does brewing. So we're going to get into that. So he's got his own little side job as well,
sounds like he's taking it a little further. So I'll be interested to hear where that's headed.
All these people that we've had on this season, everyone has not just a side hobby, but a real interest in something, kind of like yourself with music.
Yeah.
And Steve is kind of like that with brewing. Speak of Steve, here he is.
Hey, Steve.
Welcome to the podcast.
Hey.
Glad to have you on the show.
Thank you. Let me take those off. I don't necessarily need them.
Yeah, so many things about you. Where do we start, right? Because we just talked about a few different things. A very interesting person. Might be the most interesting man in America.
I don't know about that. But,
Can you tell us what it's like to be the Director of Measurement Excellence at Cummins? What a typical day consists for you in managing what you're doing with Cummins?
Well, I guess the best way to describe it is imagine leading the NCSL organization, only that you have to make money. Might be a good way to describe it, right?
Okay.
So Cummins has about 90,000 employees globally. We have a little over 200 manufacturing sites and 50 technical organizations.
Mm-hmm.
All of them contain laboratories of some form, right? Now, the thing that's important to remember when you're working for a large manufacturing company, which, by the way, I'll argue with anyone that the real metrology takes place in the manufacturing floor. That's where it takes place, right? Because every day you're working with a set of employees that have less of a skill set than maybe our technicians do, right? In many of our laboratories, but yet they are measuring out in the type of industry Cummins is in, which is powertrain, right? The tolerances of our products are about 10 years after that tolerance is realized at a national lab. So wrap your head around that. So I know the aerospace industry always thinks that they're ahead of the game, but I'm sorry, they're simply not. We are producing fuel systems components in our manufacturing labs, our manufacturing plants in southern Indiana, as an example. And our tolerances for the part are less than 10 microns.
No
That
kidding.
means that
Wow.
our measurement capability of the gauges on the floor have to be on the order of 3 to 4 microns. Okay.
That's incredibly
So
tight.
that, right. So now as you work backwards, you understand that we're looking at, we typically will end up with standards that have diameter measurements less than a micron.
Does
Or
Cummins manufacture
traceability.
most of their parts, Steve?
We manufacture about, well, that's kind of like asking me how long is a piece of string, because it varies depending on the business unit, right? It does.
Yeah.
So in our engine business units, which is what most people know us for, probably around 80% of our parts are outsourced. Well, I shouldn't say that. 80% of our value added to our parts is outsourced. So as an example, we may have parts come in that are partially machined, and then we finish machining them, right? Because we can afford the high-end machining capabilities that our suppliers can't. So that's kind of a rule of thumb within our industry. Is it's around 80% bought off furnish, because we're tier 2 to Dodge and a lot of our other large on-road and off-road OEMs. Cummins is actually composed of 4 different business units. So we have the engine business unit, which most people are familiar with. We have our power generation business units, which when it comes to large gen sets, we probably own 70% of the market.
Wow, okay, did not know that.
When it comes to components, so we have a components division that makes turbochargers, fuel injectors. We used to make filters. We buy those now. We do produce and manufacture our own exhaust after treatment systems. So we own a pretty significant part of that market as well, because those parts go on. Actually, there are a lot of instances where our parts go on competitors' engines. They buy from us the components. And then the fourth one is Accelera. Accelera is our electrical division. And Cummins is on a zero emissions 2050 mission. So by 2050, our manufacturing processes, by the time you take into account where we may reclaim, we want to be a zero emissions company. And that is dictated by our leadership. Not something that's ground up, it's top down. So we are figuring out how to do that. And you can get there. You can get there as a company, but you have to be willing to understand what it's going to take, right? And if you have that as a strategy, it's much easier. Right? If you don't have it as a strategy, it's not going to just happen on its own, right? So that's why it's important. We've had this strategy for 15 years now, but so we've made a lot of decisions along those lines. Some of the interesting things we're doing in that space is we make fuel cells, but we also make hydronizers. So basically, hydronizer produces hydrogen. And we have a partnership with the Spanish government. We have one of the largest hydroelectric plants in the world that's producing green hydrogen. So Cummins, we built a hydroelectric plant in Spain, and then we use our electrolyzers to use the power from that to generate green hydrogen. And we actually have hydrogen burning engines today. You see a lot of it in a lot of, you see a little bit of hype here and there on hydrogen burning engines. We've had engines running in test cells for years that running on hydrogen. So that's, but if you take all of that into account, right, it becomes a very complex measurement science and or metrology system. So, I always talk about the 6 different pillars of metrology: with electrical, dimensional, physical, chemical, radiation and optics, right? Mechanical. And when it comes to those 6 pillars, there isn't a pillar that Cummins is not represented within. We somewhere across the company, we execute all of those, right? We including ionized radiation, not on purpose.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that. Radiac type of equipment?
So we don't make it. We have to avoid it. So many years ago, there was I was called because I'm one of, at that time, I was one of the few people in the company that had a degree in physics. So I was pulled into a meeting and said, Steve, we've got these parts at Baltimore coming in from India and they're radioactive. And Homeland Security won't let them in. So that, well, crap, what do we do? So we looked into it. We tried to understand where the foundry got the metal from. It got it from somewhere on the open market. God only knows. Somebody took a reactor apart that shouldn't have and sold the sold the metal on the market. To give you an idea how big of a problem this is, go to the local scrap yard in your hometown, right? And when you drive up, see if there's 2 pillars, a pillar on either side. Those are radiation detectors. This occurred about, I guess, I'm going to say maybe 15 years ago. And when this radioactive material ended up on the market, especially in the automotive industry, it was a requirement in most states that you have to measure the radiation of the parts coming into your scrapyard. So we even do that, right? We have to be able to do that because we have to be able to, we never even thought about it. And we ended up building specifications and telling our suppliers how to actually measure radiation.
There's actually a scrap metal yard about 5 miles from the house. I'm going to have to look at that closer when I get past it.
Yeah, look at it one time. There should be there's 2 pillars. They use to detect it. I don't know what the hell they do to reject it, but
right.
I know they have, by law, they have to detect it in most states. So
yeah. Well, then you're already exposed by then.
No, yeah, that's right. But it gets, as you can imagine, it gets pretty complex. I've got all these different labs across the world. You can't possibly reach them all. We do have our metrology council where we try to pull in metrologists on a periodic basis. I have somebody on my staff that runs it for me. So think of it as a mini NCSL meeting.
Yeah.
We try to bring all the labs in. Now, bearing in mind that the labs don't necessarily, you think about traditional labs, you've got a senior metrologist, and then you've got people working under them, right? In industrial labs, you might have that structure, but it represents a very small percentage, right? Most of our laboratories are a group of very skilled technicians that report to, say, someone who also has the materials. Typically in our manufacturing, you're going to have a metrology lab, a chemical lab, and a material science lab. All 3 of those are going to report to the same person. They'll have an engineering background, but may not be an expert in it. So what they do is they will then send their technicians off to become experts, right? So when we have these meetings, what we try to do is we try to pull in the people who manage them as well as their senior technicians to be sure that they understand that we're a resource. Because quite honestly, when it comes to adding value to the company, what my corporate organization probably does the best, we're consultants, right? So when they run into trouble, I got an email this morning. So what a typical day is for Steve, let's see, I'm helping to develop the visual AI inspection standards for Cummins, where we're going into that. So I'm doing been dabbling for the last 3 years actually in developing a fully autonomous robotic vision inspection system up in our Jamestown plant. So I've been the senior metrologist on that, or measurement scientist. But in addition to that, I got a note from one of our tech centers in UK this morning saying, "Hey, Steve, we're trying to calculate the uncertainty of fuel measurements, and we don't know what to do with the noise content of the signal. We need coaching on signal to noise ratio." So those are the sort of typical things that we get involved in because we have a very diverse portfolio of measurement science across the company.
Yeah, that's a good application for that level of expertise.
Yeah, and I feel very proud of our organizations. For the last 20 years, I have been pushing laboratory accreditation. We don't need it to satisfy our customers' requirements, right?
Right.
My philosophy around laboratory accreditation and the application of 17025 isn't just to tick a box on a customer's ticket, right? It makes you better.
Mhm.
It makes you better at what you do.
Makes you more aware, makes your technicians more aware of both major components that cause variance and minor components. You don't necessarily have to control all the minor components every time, depending on the application, but you better be aware of the major ones. You can't ignore those because they still exist, and that's impacting your ability to measure correctly.
I've been doing uncertainty analysis training now for 25, 30 years at least. And every time I do it, I've never done it twice at the same time, and I've probably done it 1,000 times. But it's twice the same way. The one message I always provide them is I don't care whether you have 10 sources of uncertainty or 30. 3 of them are going to be the big ones.
Yep.
And the rest of them, yeah, you should be paying attention to them.
Yes.
But you're going just figure out those 3 are. That's a good start. Yeah. And most of the time,
don't overcomplicate it, right? At least hit the big ones.
Don't overcomplicate. That's right. But the whole thing around laboratory accreditation. So what I'm really, really proud of our company is over these last 20 years, I have been trying my best, and now there are 4 major technical organizations within the company around the world. We have one in England, one in India, one in China, and one in the United States. As of this last fall, we have at least 1 or 2 organizations within those technical organizations that are accredited 17025. And the one that we just recently got in the US is by far the most complex because it's a very large, very complex organization. Within that one building, there's 8,000 or 10,000 scientists and engineers and technicians. And we were able to get ourselves accredited for engine emissions testing, which is, for anyone who's been in that part of the measurement science, you realize that remember all those disciplines I just mentioned, mechanical, physical, chemical, all of that is
all encompassing. Yep.
It's all encompassing. So we're accredited. There's only probably half a dozen companies like us in the world that are accredited for those parameters. But they admitted to drug their feet for a long period of time. But now that they're through the hoop, the person who was the leader of that part of the organization, Steve, said, he tells me, he says, Steve, we're better because of what we did. We realized the holes of, could we do a better job in training our technicians? Could we do a better job in calibration? What's interesting is, one of the things I always tell everybody when I do uncertainty analysis training, I tell them, and it sounds corny, but it's a journey of discovery. As they started to look at the uncertainty analysis, they suddenly realized that they are not nearly as accurate as they thought they were, or they've never really looked at it and compared to the specs to that level.
Yeah, right? And some disciplines are more critical than others to those other components, right? Especially dimensional, temperature related, right? Weights due to gravity can be a big impact depending on where you are around the world. There's definitely some of the disciplines you better be paying attention to the uncertainty and not just the accuracy of the standard.
Exactly. So
is it a goal, Steve, for Warrior Labs to become accredited then? Is that one of your goals?
So it's one of my goals. The other thing you got to bear in mind when you're working in a large commercial company like this, and this is something we've always said, especially being in a corporate organization, I have a lot of responsibility, but not a hell of a lot of authority. So for me to be able to convince people that laboratory accreditation is the right thing, which is my goal, I have to be able to sell it. I have to be able to sell it in a business perspective. How is it ultimately, how is it going to save me cost? Right? How is it going to improve the throughput of the laboratory? Those are the things you got to, and where we see accreditation paying that back is through lowering risk. We're lowering the risk of making a bad decision because ultimately.
Can you quantify that though?
You can to a degree, yes. Yeah. There are ways. Is the uncertainty low on that quantification? No, right? But at the end of the day, you don't necessarily. It's the same thing as trying to. You can't. Yes, can you quantify how much you're going to spend in warranty on a product that fails the field? Sure, you can. Can you quantify how much future business you've lost because of that? No, you can't.
Yeah.
But you know you're going to. Right?
So that's what I call the quality blind spots, right? If you don't do this, you don't know what your risk is. And it could
That's
be
right.
small, it could be large, depending on the application.
Mhm.
You better know because it can have an impact on product, which can have an impact on finances.
That's exactly right. And at the end of the day, depending on the leadership, sometimes they're willing to stick their neck out to reduce risk.
Mhm.
Once you've convinced them there's a risk there, they realize that you may not be able to quantify it, right?
Yeah. So
But at
that's
the
the
end of the
discussion
day,
we've
they
had
know there's a
internally
risk.
as well at Transcat, right? Is there a point of diminishing returns? Absolutely. Right. How
Mhm.
far are you going to take it? And so trying to keep that balance is what you're trying to do, right? Make sure you don't
Right.
have major risks that are going to impact product or service. And make sure you're not going so far that you're spending ridiculous amounts of money that are not gaining you much.
That's right. And the thing is, the other things you pick up along the route is metrics. So you have to have metrics, right? You have to have metrics to determine your
Yes.
performance, right?
Yeah.
And you may not have a robust metric in your lab until you go down the accreditation path
Mhm.
to understand, how are you measuring your success, basically. It goes back to, that was the one thing I always thought was interesting about the Baldrige Award. So I looked into becoming a Baldrige assessor one time.
Uh-huh.
And I've attended a few Baldrige as an auditee, a few of those assessments. And one of the assessors, I remember years and years ago, at Cummins, and he went and asked the person out on the floor, "How do you know you had a good day?" I mean,
Pretty basic question.
pretty
Might
basic question,
be
right?
surprised at the answers, right?
Yeah, exactly, right. But yeah, that's been another thing I've been very proud of is that. So it's taken. Yeah, I'm on the glide path now of ending my career at Cummins and doing some other things, but I feel like I left a legacy, and now we're in the process of replacing. We're actively looking for my replacement, and we'll get the right kind of folks. Yeah, the other thing that there's two other things I think is really important for being a leader in an organization like this. And the next one I'm going to mention probably is near and dear to my heart, and that's mentorship. You need to to put yourself out there and mentor people to make them better. Find the folks that can benefit from that.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very fortunate. I've gotten an opportunity to mentor some incredibly intelligent people, and they've been able to go on, and not because of me, but because of them, go on to be leaders of the company, right? Leaders within the company. So that's a very important thing, and that translates itself into some of the work I do with universities. So the University of North Carolina in Charlotte is in my opinion, is premier university probably in the world in dimensional metrology.
It is. And by the way, since we haven't really known each other that well in the past, I spent time as an advisor at UNCC.
Oh, excellent.
I did. So I did that for a few years and then just got too busy with other work. But and we've actually hired people out of the master's program for UNC Charlotte. So that's fantastic. I agree with you completely.
Yeah, I've probably hired about a dozen over years.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So.
Well, Steve, what drew you into metrology? I mean, obviously one can just have a conversation and come from that conversation, you're extremely skilled. What drew you into metrology? Was there one special event or was it a combination of things?
So, when I graduated university, I looked at different positions, and this position at the U.S. Navy popped up, and it was at the Naval Avionics Center in Indianapolis. It looked interesting, right? Because I've been, I guess the thing that drove me towards it to a degree, went to college to become a physicist, right? So I wanted to be a physicist. And a lot of the other jobs that I looked at wouldn't let me do that. So I ended up, and my wife always jokes, she was working at the factory. When I started working for the Navy, she was making more money than I was working at, out in the factory floor. But the salary goes up quickly. But I started working in the metrology lab, and I realized that this is basically an applied physics lab
Yes, it
at
is.
some level, right? That's what it is. That's what
Applied
it is.
physics, applied chemistry, applied engineering. It's just
All
everything.
of those, all of those. So that drew me in, and within a very short period of time, I was hooked. And
Yeah.
I had some great mentors there that kept me on the right path. And everything I did led on to something else. So I started in DC, low frequency AC, but I shortly went into optics, which is interesting because now all those skills I learned back then, I'm still using today with this vision AI system.
Oh yeah, right.
Because the problem we run into with AI, they think the AI is going to fix it. It's not the problem. You need to get the right cameras and the optics, right? But at the end of the day, that's what drew me in. And then I ended up going to my first NCSL conference in 83. Yeah, 83. It was in DC, and it was an anniversary conference. I want to say 83, 84, something like that. I'd have to look it up. But so I went to this conference, and I realized there's a bunch of other kind of nerdy guys like me that, we could have a good, robust conversation about details of what we do every day.
Right.
So that's what drew me into that. And it just sort of blossomed from there. I worked for the Navy for 7 years. And then one morning, and I think I was just moving into microwaves, because it was a multidiscipline lab, right? So I was moved up to microwave emissions. And one of my technicians that works with me puts this ad on the paper, or the Indianapolis Star ad on my desk. It said, "Steve, this is your job description." And it was looking for somebody with the exact background I had. So I went, interviewed. I actually had an offer on the phone by the time I got back from the interview. And this is where I started with Datron.
Oh, Datron. Okay.
Right. So I started with Datron in 88, and I worked for them until 93. So I worked there for 5 years. And that was an incredible opportunity.
That was the calibrators at the time, right? To be using multifunction calibrators. 88. So 87, 88, I was at Lockheed Martin or Martin Marietta at the time in Orlando. And our primary electrical lab had all Datron calibrators in it.
You were a big customer of mine. Matter of fact, I can't remember the guy's name now, but you had a supplier. Maybe you have a supplier quality engineer that came in every year and assessed me. It might have been Roy.
Can't remember his last name at the moment, but yeah, it might have been him.
It might have been him. And he was a very interesting fella.
Yeah.
Right. He was very practical in his approach. When he found us doing something wrong, he called us out on it. And, and he was right. There was nothing wrong with what when he found something wrong, it was actually wrong. So I learned a lot from, and that's back in the days, well before laboratory accreditation took hold in the United States, right? So I was audited. I think I was audited once a month by somebody.
Well, yeah.
So it was busy, to say the least.
Well, I think one thing I want to touch base next on, Steve, is obviously you are a big NCSLI guy. You've been, part of NCSLI for, like you said, since 84, 85. And you were, to a certain extent, acknowledged by your peers. By last year, you are the Wildhack winner from last year. And congratulations again on that.
Yes, congratulations. That is the prestigious award for metrology. That is incredible.
Yeah. It is. It's a huge deal. It's a huge deal because I've seen so many people who are so much better than me get it. Right. Yeah, I was humbled by it. I am.
It is humbling. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember you were not expecting it. I mean, obviously, you were in the audience, and when you went up there, you were like, I remember the presentation. You were totally shocked, and it's entertaining for me and the other members in the audience to see, how much of a surprise you were, and how you accepted that award. It was fabulous.
Okay, well, thank you. Yeah, it was very, very unexpected. My wife cried actually when she heard about it.
Yeah. Yeah, that recognition is important, and I'm glad to see that you received that.
Yeah. So it goes without doubt that you were, your peers respect you tremendously. So with that, is there any advice that you would give someone new coming into the community that wants to start in the metrology business?
So I guess I guess my advice is kind of let the career form, right? Don't force it. Go down the path that you think that you have a lot of technical interest in, because you're only going to be successful if you're interested in what you do.
Yes.
And find something. If you go in the metrology lab and you say this is right, because that's what I've seen, and people who are very successful in this end up going into it. And I'll give this piece of advice to leadership, to leaders who are in my similar roles as me. I realized many years ago that my role at Cummins was not to develop metrologists. My
Mhm.
role at Cummins is to develop metrology skills and develop those skills in the hands of the people who can use them. Right. So people coming into metrology come into it with an open mind, do the work. If it's really interesting to you, you'll stick. If it's not, that's okay. You'll
Yeah.
move on to somewhere else, but you'll take the skills with you. Right.
Mhm.
And you'll use those skills somewhere else in your organization to add value. So it's not about making metrologists, it's about deploying skills.
So I agree with that philosophy. You should follow your path where you have your strengths, develop your weaknesses to improve those,
That's
but
right.
follow the strengths and the interest, because the motivation counts. If you're not motivated to do what you're doing for every day of your life for the rest of your career, you're not going to be very productive.
You're not. You're not.
Yeah.
But we did a lot of internships for quite some time with engineering students, right? And engineering students most likely won't move into metrology. They could, right, into a
Okay.
metrology position,
Sure.
but as a calibration tech, probably not. And I've talked about this before on other episodes of our podcast, but a lot of the engineering curriculum does not include traceability of measurement, metrology concepts. Maybe you have a class on introductory, here's what instruments are, and that's it, and how to use them. But you don't really get the background you need. And so those internships, those co-ops definitely help those engineering students gain some skills and knowledge they wouldn't have gotten otherwise.
Yeah, it does. It does. And
And
we
then
do a
maybe you
lot of
draw
that.
them into the career. You never know.
That's right. Exactly. No, that's exactly the right approach. I agree with that. We do have students, we have new engineers coming into different parts of the organization. The one thing that we found is valuable, and we can't do this for everybody because there's so many, so many engineers coming in, but for a select few, what we'll do is we may bring them into the lab for 6 months, let them work side by side with the techs, understand what's going on, right? Especially people going into manufacturing, because we want to make sure they have the right kind of skills going into that.
Especially manufacturing, yes.
Right. So what we'll do is we will do a hands-on sort of mentorship program, and we'll set them off. Do they wreck equipment? Absolutely, they do. But that's how you learn, right? So,
well, you hope you learn from that, because if you're not, you need to move on.
I hope you learn from it. Yeah. But again, it gets that to your point. You've got to try it and see, they're going to stick or it isn't. But even if it doesn't stick, you're still going to carry the skills with you.
Yes, you will.
Right.
Have you any metrics within the metrology group on how long your metrologists stay? Because we talked about training, a lot of training. Overall, the NCSLI and the other have identified a training need, but the fact is that the metrologists are usually within an organization or within the industry for a long time. Once you start this field,
you tend to stick with it. But again, it's kind of ebbs and flows, right? Remember again that realistically, in most of our laboratories, I'll call it probably more on the manufacturing side than the engineering side. But you bring a metrologist in, you bring somebody in and train them to be a metrologist, they'll stick with it. Sometimes they'll stick with it. Like, first, I got one person working for me on my staff has been doing metrology his entire career. He's probably coming on 25 years now, right? I have another person in the lab who leads my corporate lab, and he has a master's degree in material science. He bid into my lab during an opening because he wanted to know more about metrology, and we'll probably hold on to him for 10, 15 years. There are other ones where you're going to bring them in, they're going to spend a few years and then move on to another role, right? So it's, again, it's not creating metrologists, it's giving people metrology skills. If it sticks, awesome. Then you've got somebody who's a trainer. If it doesn't stick, then you do need to lean on organizations like NCSL to provide those skills or come up with ways to provide them. Speaking of which, one of the things that I committed to the new organization that's leading NCSL, I'm writing a white paper on a way that I believe would be to certify people in metrology skills. So one, as an example, in the UK, they've had this program for 20 years probably. Rolls-Royce was the one who primarily started it, and NPL, they actually reached out to me because I knew the folks at Rolls-Royce really well. So I was pulled into to help with some of the original foundational design of the program, right? And it's taught at university level. So the University of Coventry, just north of Daventry, well, in Coventry, they're one of the main universities that do the training at the collegiate level. But I think that having a certification program would be very important. And well, we get to this part of it, but you could, I think NCSL 100% can do this without being the ones who offer the training.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They just set the requirements. And then they certify the organizations to do the training, basically. That they're a governing body, which they should be. That's where the organization should lie, and there's still, at the end of the day, a revenue stream associated with that. When we get to the other part of my life, we'll describe how I ended up where I did owning a brewery, because I have an example of how to do this that works every day.
Okay.
Well, before we get into that, because that's very interesting, and I do want to get there, who was your mentor? Who brought you along? Who was the biggest influence?
Dr. Klaus Jaeger.
Oh, Klaus Jaeger, yeah.
Yes, by far. Ed Nemiroff.
Mm-hmm.
Ed Nemiroff hired me to come into Waytech, Datron. And then Klaus taught me the disciplines, because he said, you say, if you say you're going to do something, you shall do it. There's no excuse for not doing it.
Right. You're committed.
Harry Moody, I loved Harry Moody. You are committed. I loved Harry Moody to death. He's an awesome guy that I've met throughout my career, but I've met them all through NCSL.
Yeah.
I've been the true mentors that kept me on the straight and narrow, right? Like I said, Klaus, he's the super technical guy, so he kept me on the technical side of straight and narrow. Ed has an amazing acuity for business and leadership, so I think I learned a lot from him. And my days in working for Datron, I really feel that's when I learned my leadership skills, was working for them.
That's fantastic.
They were the two people most influential in that part of my career.
So I know all those names that you mentioned, and I've met those people and interacted with them as well, but I bet a large part of our audience doesn't know who they are.
Probably not.
No.
No, probably not. Mike Sorosi was the other one. He's always been out there. He's been sort of the if Klaus was the tactical guy, Ed was the leadership guy, Mike was the guy that makes sure that you're connected, right? That you're connected to the right people at the right time and all the information you need. Mm-hmm. That's how I would probably best portray him. He's the one that always made sure that you need to know what's going on. That was Mike. Yeah, you're right. A lot of people aren't going to know who those people are. Aren't, right. Which is a shame, because they're incredible individuals.
Yeah, they're definitely pillars of the community.
Well, definitely NCSLI. All those individuals were, embedded deeply in NCSLI.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, and Klaus, okay. I mean, a lot of people don't know this. Klaus was he led the American Physical Society. So he was, American Physical Society is a global, Klaus International, actually. So they're a physicist. So he was the nerdiest of all of them.
He actually
Well,
was
what-
an assessor for a couple of our audits.
Yeah,
Years
but
ago.
that one
It's been years ago. Yeah.
Do you know what we all have in common with those guys? With with all those guys, with Klaus and Harry and Ed and Mike?
Wait, is this leading to a joke, or are you actually?
We'll have the
Well, it's
gray
not a
hair.
joke. It's our hair. We all through.
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
true.
We're all up there as well. And this is a key
Right.
point why NCSLI is so important is, we're going to be, I'm semi-retired. I'll be fully retired this year, but we need to train people to take our place. Absolutely.
That's right.
That is
And so, and all those individuals were key on training, whether it was Ed,
They were.
or Mike or whoever,
Absolutely.
they were big on making NCSLI a bigger organization. So I think those individuals, should be talked about more than they are as being, the pillars of NCSLI as well. So,
Exactly.
well, let's talk about your passion, Steve, because we're going to run out of time if we don't get to your passion.
They are.
So
So-
I know that you love to make beer. I know that's the wrong way to say it.
This
So-
topic has been brewing for 45 minutes now.
It has been brewing for 45 minutes. Exactly.
So tell us about your life as a brewer. How did this come about? What made you want to become a brewer? Not just making beer on the side, but a real brewer.
So yeah, so I started home brewing in 2000. My kids made the mistake of getting me a homebrew kit in 2000, right when I started consulting, because I left Cummins for a while, started my own consulting business, and then came back. A lot of people don't know that either. So anyway, I started brewing, and I realized, you know what? There's a lot of science involved here, right? Thermodynamics, mass, microbiology, chemistry, all of those things you need to know. And, when I first started brewing, I thought, well, shit, I'll just read a book and figure out how to do it. And then I realized there's hundreds and hundreds of books on it. Right. So I started brewing. I went into a local brewery that I still go to on a daily or weekly basis now, and went and talked to the head brewer, and he says, you know what? He says, I had happened to have some homebrew the one time. He tried, says, this is really good. You should start entering competitions. I thought, oh, okay. So I started entering competitions, and then I started getting feedback from the judges. Well, adjust the temperature, or adjust the grain, or you should use this hop, or adjust the temperature and fermentation, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm thinking, how the hell do they know that? So then I started looking into it, and I ended up with the opportunity to be a sit-in judge. They were short judges, so they let me sit in. It's fascinating. At that point, I was hooked. I was hooked. The whole prospect of judging. So I thought, well, shit, I'll become a judge. So despite my degree in physics, despite that I have, I've worked so many years in science and in engineering, I failed the online exam 4 times.
Wow.
It's 200 questions, multiple choice, multiple answer, and true false. And you have, I think, 2 hours to finish it. So the timing works out. You've got about 13 seconds per question. But it's open book, but it doesn't matter, right? So what they did is they built this huge body of knowledge, and then every time you log into the system, it randomly selects all these different questions. And then when you fail, it doesn't tell you what questions you failed. It just told you broadly what subject you failed in.
Right.
And then a lot of times it come back with, oh, you should read these 4 books, right? So I went through that. It took me about 2 years to have all the time to do the studying and get through the exam. And then you go through the proficiency exam. And a proficiency exam, the way it works is you sign up. It can take you a year to take the proficiency exam after you've done the online, because they're all for all over the world. The organization I went through is the Beer Judge Certification Program, BJCP. So it's an international organization. There are thousands of judges in the United States and tens of thousands across the world. And so I take this exam, then I go to a brewery a couple hours away. They take some beers, they put them in front of you, they doctor them with all flavors, and they said, okay, here you go. Tell me what style of beer is this, and by the way, what are the flaws, right? And then you go through that. You write out your proficiency test, which is color, flavor, mouthfeel, and overall impression against the style, right? I'm sorry, smell and overall impression. And then you write all this out, and then they have 3 expert judges that are tasting the same thing. And they take all this information, they send it to the home office, which, by the way, is in Boulder, Colorado. And they then will take these exams, put them in packets, and send them out to judges at large.
Mm-hmm.
They will then judge how closely you matched the experts. Then all that information goes back. So it takes about 6 months.
Pretty intensive.
To know whether you failed or not, right?
Yeah.
And by the way, you don't get paid anything for this. You just do it because
Nope.
it's fun, right? But the thing that's fascinating about it is just the level of science is involved in it. So, there's all these different techniques and testing methodologies that you use to do all of this. But the more I got into it, the more fascinated I was by all of that. Because like I said earlier, at the root, I'm a physicist. I love doing that stuff.
So I'm headed down a parallel path for barbecue, right? So I attended the World Series of Barbecue here in Kansas City for the first time this year or last year.
Oh, awesome.
And heading towards becoming a certified judge and then to become a master judge, that level of intensity that you're talking about, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we should get together after we're retired and have a Q and brew for the NCSL.
There you
events.
go. There you go. So anyway, it just sort of led me down a path, and it's pretty standard. Home brewer, certified judge, Yoda brewery. It's just sort of that happens, right? And
that's awesome.
So we've got a brewery, and I was mentioning earlier to Chuck that one of the things where I've been able to do, I actually did a presentation is metrology of beer. So I've got a presentation on that talks about the different testing methodologies you use when you're brewing and what the uncertainty and how to calculate the uncertainty. And I've given this at a couple of different brewing conferences already. And I did it once at NCSL, actually.
How does that go over with the brewing community?
They look at you like you have 2 heads.
Yeah,
right?
that's what I figured.
And
it's like, what in the world are you talking about?
But there'll be 1 or 2 that'll come up in the audience, say, I never thought about that, right?
Yeah.
I didn't think about the sources of error in this measurement.
Yeah.
So the light bulbs do come on. And then there was an opportunity to get an advanced manufacturing grant through the state of Indiana. So I applied and I got it. And my grant was for developing sensor technology for brewing science. Because the reason I'm doing this is, and I'm going to make the information coming out of this public domain, because little breweries like us basically get really screwed by the big companies who make the sensors and technology, because the technology doesn't cost even close to what they charge you for it. Little guys like us, we can't afford it. So I'm developing technology based on fundamental science that you can develop basically on your own, right? And I'm just going to, anything that's patentable, I'll patent. But the only reason I'll do that is because I don't want somebody to go off, take my idea, make a bunch of money.
Yeah, and close it out to the rest of the world.
Close it out to the rest of it, yeah. So all of that's going to be public domain. I've already got a web domain established, I don't have anything on it yet. But I will then, once I retire, my last day at Cummins is April 30th. So this summer, I'll get into this a little more detail. But I'll begin to publish designs, methodologies. I'm doing dashboards on what to do with the data, tell people how to collect the data, put it online so you can access it, those kinds of things. Stuff that everybody can do, they just don't know how.
Right.
Yeah. Do you have a favorite beer, Steve? Favorite type of beer?
People ask me that all the time. It depends on the mood, right? So one of the beers that it's probably my one that I've been trying to promote as much as possible. But aside from that, one of my favorites, especially during summer, is my GI beer. I am an avid listener to podcasts for brewing, and there's a guy who does a podcast for brewing science. And there's a historian for brewing in the United States. That's all he does. He teaches brewing history. On the way into work one day, I was listening to this guy, and it turns out that they made the GI beer, government issue beer. It was produced at the beginning of World War II and sent to the soldiers in Europe.
It's just like government cheese, but for the beer.
Exactly.
I didn't even know that existed.
No, I didn't either. And about a dozen breweries in the United States were contracted by the government to produce for 15% of their production to go into making GI beer. And they'd make it here and they'd ship it over to the European theater. My dad and my father-in-law both served in World War II. So we introduced it on Father's Day this last year.
Wow.
And this is from
It's a
your
very
brewery?
light lager beer.
Okay.
And you can drink it all day long and not feel a thing.
Wow. Okay. How can we test it? Is there a way that we can get it?
Only in southeastern Indiana. I have no interest in being larger than that. But if
You
in
know, it's not
southeastern
that far of a
Indiana,
drive from where you are to Kansas City for the NCSL. You could import some.
yeah, there you go.
So you have it on the shelf in Indiana. You have some on the
Yes,
local
I do.
shelves? Okay,
Yep,
cool.
Yep.
All right. So then
But
the
anyway,
next question
that's
is,
one of my favorites.
how many different types of beers? What types of beers do you produce?
The last time I checked, my recipe portfolio is around 65.
That's a lot.
Wow.
Yeah. We're a small brewing system, so we can mix it up a lot.
Yeah.
We've got probably 5 beers that are on tap all the time, and all the rest of them rotational. I just got to tell you one story. The one thing you're going to love about this. So my wife and I go down to Brevard, North Carolina quite a bit. We love the area. It's down south of Asheville.
Mhm.
We were driving around one day, and we found this road. And I'm gonna spell the name for you and see if you get it. It's spelled Dunwerkin.
Done working?
Done working.
Yeah, I love that name.
So,
I'm done
so
working.
we were going to do a done working beer
I love
when I
it.
retire.
Yeah.
But what we decided to do instead, we're going to do a done working tap. So I'm resurrecting my homebrew system. I'm going to do all these experimental beers, one keg at a time.
Mhm.
And that's going to go in the done working tap. So God only knows what I'll come up with.
Fantastic.
Cool.
I love it.
Howard, any questions that you have that you want to ask, you haven't been able to ask yet?
You know, our standard questions. What's your most memorable metrology moment in your career?
When I was recently working with Global Lab here in Indiana, and they were getting ready to become accredited. Remember, it took them almost 3 years, by the way,
Mhm.
to get it done, because it's a big organization. I was in a meeting with them, and they've been trying different ways to do analysis of errors, those type of things. But the leader came to me and said, Steve, I get it. I know now why we're doing this. And he was not necessarily on board the whole time.
So because he
And-
saw the end result, he could connect the dots?
He could connect the dots. That's
Yeah.
right.
That's
I get it.
rewarding. Yeah.
That's rewarding.
Fantastic.
Well, you're going to retire though in April, which is a bad thing for the measurement community. So with that being said, if there's one thing you could change about metrology related in the history that you've had so far, is there anything that you could go back 20 years, 10 years, 5 days and change that you did in your career?
I think trying to better educate, better train the technicians and the metrologists, give them a better path to understand what they're doing, I think would be important. That's why I have a lot of passion around this, potentially the certification program I think NCSL could sponsor. I think that's the miss. There are a lot of universities and colleges offer different types of measurement science courses, and I get that, right? But at the end of the day, how do you know that people are really getting it? I started some different programs, but I just ran out of arms and legs to keep them going. That if I was going to do anything different, I probably would have focused a lot more on more of a, what I'll call regimented training program.
Okay.
And right, it's always been ad hoc. I tell people to come, as I said, I'm leaving the company, not the planet. So I'll be around to ask questions and to help in this. And you know, I've always had a lot of passion for measurement science and metrology, and always will.
Mhm.
And one of the reasons that my wife was willing to let me start the brewery, she said, I can't possibly have you around with nothing to do. Because I am a type A personality. I have to be doing something all the time, right? Matter of fact, I have to be doing 6 things all at the same time.
When will your paper be done that you're writing?
I'll finish it by probably the 1st of April. I want to make sure I get it done before I retire. I honestly don't know how to publish it, right? I'm not even sure how to even get it out there. But I do want to offer it to the organizations leading NCSL now, so they can at least mull it over.
Sure.
My opinion, I can tell you why I'm doing this. Remember what I just described going through to become a beer judge?
Yeah.
Replicate that.
Yeah.
Just replicate. It already exists. Just do that.
It's effective. Right.
It's effective. You
Just
can
use a
send them to
parallel
a lab.
path.
You can send them to a lab and show that they can actually do calibrations. What's wrong with that? It'll work. You could proctor it in the labs. If they work somewhere already, you could send a proctor like me in to watch them do the measurements to make sure they're doing it right, and then sign off on it. But it's got to have both.
I've thought along those lines with you.
You've got to be able to show you can do it.
Proctoring it, proving it, that's where the application is required.